Paul, thank you very much for agreeing to this project. We are very honored that we can be here with you for the Oral History of Tibetan Studies project at Oxford. And we would like to ask you about your life, as you know.
And I would like to tell you. I was in Oxford from, I think, 72 till I finally left Oxford at the beginning of 80. I spent a year out in the middle in Edinburgh, where I stood in for John Brockington, teaching Indian civilization and religions and things like that for a year while he was on sabbatical. I started doing Tibetan at that time, entirely taught myself. There was no Tibetan studies in Oxford when I first came to Oxford. I mean, none. This was before Michael Aris came. And I started learning Tibetan initially for one purpose only, in order to be able to cross-check the Sanskrit texts. And I quickly became aware, of course, that there's a vast amount in Tibetan. I don't mean indigenous Tibetan texts, I mean translations of Sanskrit texts in Tibetan, which are lost in Sanskrit. And so I originally started to learn Tibetan so I could access. And I can't describe to you the excitement in those days of knowing, for example, that Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka Karika had a commentaries by Buddhapalita, by Bhavaviveka, and a commentary attributed to Nagarjuna himself, which simply weren't being studied by anyone because they were in Tibetan and they weren't in Sanskrit anymore. I can't describe to you the excitement of getting a Tibetan text and saying, ha ha, he's saying this. You know, there was very little use of Tibetan in the study of Madhyamaka back in the 60s and 70s. But it was only then, after I'd done some Tibetan, I was using Tibetan, I used Tibetan in my doctoral thesis, but not very much, that Michael Aris turned up as a fellow of St John's College. Michael and Sue, of course, and their children. I think one of them was born while he was in Oxford. And we got to know, Michael, I heard, was teaching Tibetan. Was going to teach a Tibetan. So I was with Michael's very first Tibetan language class. And it wasn't until Michael turned up that I actually learned to pronounce Tibetan. And we often forget this. And I've come across this particularly in the old days, with Eastern European Tibetologists who had never heard Tibetan being spoken. So you go to a conference and they would be talking about Slig Glog Grubspo and things like that. You know, of course, if you've not heard, Tibetan is incredibly difficult to pronounce unless you've learned it from somebody who knows how to do it. And so it was from Michael that I learned how to pronounce Tibetan, which was the result that my pronunciation of Tibetan is appallingly bad even now. People sometimes say it's a little bit Bhutanese, and I've heard Tibetan say that my pronunciation is a reasonable attempt of a southern Englishman to speak with Lhasa dialect.
So how old was he at this time?
Would have been 13, 14. But it was so strong, his desire to learn Tibetan. This is what really is important, that he didn't stop wanting to understand all about the culture, all about the iconography, all about the religion, all that. And the monks encouraged him, the Catholic school, they encouraged him. And my mother, who I told you was already interested in Tibet, so for birthday presents and Christmas presents, she wouldn't give him the odd toy. She'd go and root around in the Portobello market in London, and she'd buy these amazing Tibetan things from the refugees who were leaving Tibet at that time. There was a big diaspora, big exodus from Tibet, mostly, I imagine, into India, but a lot of them must have been coming to London as well. So over the years, the twins collected a wonderful lot of things. And they got really interested in I think they both did. Michael particularly, he was very good at languages. Anthony, much more artistic. He was much more interested in the artifacts, the iconography and all that. Michael's much more interested in the language itself. And I'm very proud to say, when they were 14, we went to the V&A, to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and Michael was talking to the curator of Tankas they took us to the reserve collection in Ealing. The museum had a reserve collection of tankas, and Michael was able to interpret them to the curator. Now, I might be making this up, but I remember being there, and it was unbelievable that it was so young. He'd already got so interested, really, really, really interested, and encouraged by my mother as well.
When you were at high school, did you maintain this interest in Asia? Or this intriguing feeling about?
No, I don't think so. I think it really started with another thing in Berkeley, or before, just before. After school, I went to Canada. I immigrated. I couldn't immigrate to the United States because they had a clause. So I went to Canada. I went first to the east, and then I went to the west, to Vancouver Island, because I wanted to be close to the Kwakiutl Indians. That interested me a lot. And then I worked as a lumberjack in the field, in the hills, and when the forest was burning, they kicked us out, several of us who were not in the union. And so I started to work in Vancouver in George V Hotel. And there I had a very important meeting. I was bringing whiskey to the rooms, and in one of the big rooms was a Chinaman with his family. And with the clinking of the whiskies in the room that I brought, he invited me for a drink, although I was just a servant. And during our talk, he suddenly said to me, "You are at the wrong place, young man." And he was Chinese. I thought, well, what does he mean? And then he said, "Come to Berkeley. I'll find you a scholarship." Just like that. And I did. So I went to Berkeley, and this man was Zhao Yuanren. Yeah. Still today, people in China take their hats off in memory of this great, short, beautifully modest man. And I learned Chinese with him. And then my interest in Asia emerged. Yeah.
Jim Smith was also an extraordinary, he was larger than life, really. And he was very kind. He had a job at the Library of Congress, but as soon he had no private life as such. As soon as he came back from office, he would receive Tibetan, so the house would be filled with Tibetan who bring them, or Bhutanese who will bring them manuscript, and that's how I met the first Bhutanese. And bring him manuscript, and he would be reading. And I was like this, like totally amazed by his knowledge. I was just in the first year of PhD. I couldn't believe somebody like that existed. His mastery of the text, of the history of the lineage, of the literature was, and I was really in awe. And then I started doing my PhD, and he advised me so kindly. He never said, "Oh, you are just a young student, you're not interested in you." At 4 o'clock, when you stay in his house, at 4 o'clock in the morning, every morning, you were woken up by he had a typewriter, and he was typing in Wiley Tibetan text from 4 to 7 every morning, and then take his breakfast, and then go to the Library of Congress office. He was a workhorse. Then in his garage, he had all the texts. In his room, he had some text, favorite text. In the garage, he had he had put all the text by, and it was his dear Mangaram who was helping him. And Mangaram is very important for the Tibetology, and I want him to be remembered, because not only he fed all of us, Tadeusz Gorubski, Elliot Sperling. I met so many people in Jinsma, and Mangaram was feeding us, and he was also going to get the books from the garage when we needed and all. So, and I'm very happy to see he has done very well for himself in life. So he was really a very important person, and we all loved him, and the dogs.
How was it staying with David Snellgrove? I also think that in his house you were involved in building the first stupa in England. Is it correct?
Yes,
A Bonpo
yes,
stupa?
Yes. And this was in Buckinghamshire, in his garden. And this was actually Tenzin who always interested in. By the way, he himself is an artist, and he draws. And he always interested in the architectural aspect of stupas, different type of stupas, and so on. He always have a file on the drawing of these things. And he showed this to David. And the question was, can we build a small one in our garden? Yes. So he said, then who designed this stupa. And then I just participated into this work and the bricks and cement and all that. Yes.
Paul, we have a few concluding questions that we ask the same to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is, personally, what has your career in Buddhist studies or Tibetan studies given to you?
My career?
Yeah, how is it?
Oh, pretty good income. No. I don't know. I mean, okay, are we emphasising here the word career? Or are we emphasising the content involved? I mean, my academic career, yes. I mean, the content of the study of things Tibetan, and it has given me, I'm almost sort of Buddhist approach to this. I mean, we are each of us a story, a developing story, a story that's not yet over. And my story, at any particular point at which we refer to it, is me at that point. So the story of me now, is a story which is built on all that I've done in Buddhist studies and in Tibetan studies. So what has it given me? It's given me.